My name is John Smith. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, John.
Appreciate the kind words, Tanner. I appreciate everyone having me here tonight. Last time I was down here, actually, I saw Tanner pick up a year at this meeting, which is insane. So I met Tanner through his brother, and I've had the privilege of working with him, which got me introduced to some of you guys. And I come down here, I'd say, a couple times a month. And I really enjoy coming down here, especially this group. I love seeing things like down here. I was noticing the detox thing on there, that this group takes meetings in the detox. My home group does that as well. That's been something really important to me in my sobriety is doing those things and really just approaching the newcomer like I was approached. My sobriety date is February 14th, 2016. My home group is in downtown Raleigh. It's the Way of Life group. We meet on Monday nights at 8 o'clock. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor other men as well. For me, I guess I'm here to share my story and how share my experience, strength, and hope here in Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was younger, I always had this idea that drinking was awesome. I didn't realize this until later in life now, getting sober, because it just seems so normal to me. My parents, they both drink normally. My sister, who is a year older than me, she still drinks. She drinks normally. And alcohol was something in the house that I just grew up around. We went on vacation. Everyone drank. And I can remember, looking back now, when I was probably about 5 years old, my sister had one of those little kitchen sets, and I had a mini pool table. And what we would play is we would play bar. She would serve me root beers, and I would shoot pool and throw darts, as she would play bartender and serve me drinks. And that does not make me an alcoholic at all. But it's just crazy looking back to see, like, that's what my mind went with drinking. I associated drinking with having fun. And it was probably around 8th grade when I took my first drink. And then I saw what it was all about. Alcohol was fun. Alcohol, my life growing up was very normal. 2 parents, they met when they were 13 and 14 years old, still married to this day. The most just normal life that you could have. Lived in the city. They moved me to the suburbs, put me in a better school district. Everything from there, just perfect. But for me, when I took that first drink, the best way that I could describe it was that my life was about at a 5 without drinking. But when I drank, my life went up to a 10. And it wasn't like I was chasing anything, running from anything. It was just that I'm chasing that. Like, I want to be at a 10 at all times. And if I could find some liquid that I could put in my body that makes me feel like that, then I'm absolutely going to do that as much as possible. So through high school, that's what it became. It was just chasing that just as much as it was available. Like, I remember back in my junior year of high school having like a liquor dealer. Like, that was the older kid that could go to the ABC store and buy us alcohol. And my plan every Wednesday was I need to nail him down so that Friday at 2 o'clock, my bottle is there waiting on me. And as it became easier and more available, I continued to drink more and more, and without consequences. I had great times drinking. I wouldn't have drank for so long if it wasn't great. Went to college. I was always good at just school. I was good at taking tests. Wasn't good at showing up. However, I was good at passing the tests. So that really wasn't an issue. So I picked a school that all my friends were going to. That was one I knew the tests were going to be a little easier than some of the other schools so that I could drink. And that was the focus. All throughout college, I ended up making through, graduating. But my drinking increased for sure. That is where, like, looking back now in retrospect, that's where I start to notice that I started to lose control of my drinking, was in college. And what that looked like was there were some events in college looking now, I could say that I'm an alcoholic. When the thing with me is when I intake alcohol, I cannot control the amount that I take. And for me, the issue with that is I can't control how much I'm bringing in, and once I start bringing in a lot, I can't control my actions from there. So there were definitely times where I was getting myself into trouble, still no major consequences. I remember the first time that I actually tried to, talks about in the book, like moderate my drinking. One of my friends, we were getting into mischief, and we were out at a bar, and he got into an altercation with a guy, and he shot this person. And what I saw in myself, this was my best friend, and I was right there behind him. Like, that could have very easily been me doing that. And looking at that, it was like, okay, I really need to get this together, because he's still in prison to this day for that. And that was the first time that I really tried to control my drinking. What controlled drinking to me, because I couldn't imagine life like not drinking. So what that meant was switching substances. Some of the outside substances I switched to. And then for the rest of college, what that involved was bouncing back and forth. But it was always somehow, it ended up with me going out drinking, saying that I was going to have just a few drinks. So many nights that I was going to go out and I was going to be like the other normal college kids that went out on a Wednesday night or a Monday night football just to go drink and have a few, share like a pitcher. But I was the guy that never left the bar. But still made it through without any problems. However, at the same time, that was the focus. The focus of my life was on the party. I had no goals, no ambitions, besides the fact that I wanted to make a lot of money so that I could drink how I wanted to. When all my other friends were graduating and moving on with their lives, I didn't really have any options because I didn't do those other things that people do. I'm sponsoring a guy right now he's 21 years old. He's at NC State. And this kid is like just the model student. It's insane. I look at him like, if I would have been sober when I was in college, that would have been amazing. I mean, he's doing internships, applying for those on time, all those things like extracurriculars. That wasn't me. Like, my focus was to just barely, if I was allowed to have 6 absences, I was absent 6 days. I was going to show up on test day and make it through, and then I was going to go drink as much as possible that night. That seemed like the ideal life for me, and I was just going to plan skating through life like that. What that led to is after college, having no sense of direction, me ended up moving back into my parents' house. And my drinking at this point, I really had no responsibilities. I was working at a bar, which absolutely just promoted drinking. At the end of every night, we got a shift beer, and that shift beer was just the start for me. A lot of my story also involves other substances. I qualify for numerous fellowships. However, I'll keep it to alcohol. There might be some others slipped in. However, the issue at that point, what I saw was the issue, was a few things. It was that I didn't have the job that anyone else landed, so this was my time to just get it all out of my system. I never had enough money to support myself. I thought that was a major problem. But also, my body was coming dependent on drugs and alcohol. So the biggest goal for me was to somehow detox myself so that I could wake up that 3 days later, or however long I need to detox, and just feel okay. And for the next year, I did that. That's what I did. I would go on these sprees, and then I would, just like the book talks about, I would emerge remorseful. I'd say, oh my God, what did I do? I blew all this money. What am I doing? Let me get back on track and get my life together. But at this point, I knew nothing about alcoholism, nothing about Alcoholics Anonymous, and honestly, I just wasn't ready to stop at that point. The first time that I really tried to stop drinking, and at this point, I had to stop drinking, I had to stop all other substances, was, like I said, I'm good at taking tests. I watched this show, Suits. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with it. It's about this lawyer. And I applied for law school. I took the LSATs, and somehow I got in. Got into law school, and that was my deadline. Was the day that law school started, that's when like John was just going to grow up. That's when I was going to stop waking up hungover every morning. I set myself a deadline. I detoxed myself. Somehow I managed to detox myself leading up to that first day. And this was when like I was going to conquer life, and I was going to get my life together. Classes, I think, started on a Tuesday. I was going to Campbell Law in downtown Raleigh. And on that Friday, everyone ended up at a bar. That's just what they did. That's what normal people do. Like, after a week of your first day class at law school, you go to a bar We got like 2 drink tickets or something like that. And in the time that everyone else just, had their beers and they were sipping on them, I pounded 2 beers, and then I was off to go meet up with my friends that drank and partied like I did. From that day forward in law school, I wasn't sober a single day. And part of that had to do with that I somehow got a scholarship, and also on that same day, there was a large chunk of money that was placed in my bank account. So for me, it was like, okay, that was the issue before. The issue before was money. So now I can, that won't be an issue anymore. So I could drink how I like to drink. These are all the rationalizations that I put in my head. However, I did set another deadline after that, because now, when I was supposed to grow up, now I'm missing class. It is so hard for me to show up for class hungover. I'm not one of those people that can do things hungover. However, with law school, I had to do that, and I also had to show up and be ready. And that got really tiring on me to do that. And then, of course, all these other things. My world is just kind of crashing at this point. I'm trying to juggle with school. By now, I'm living back home with my parents, and they're seeing me supposed to be in school, but they're seeing the struggles that I'm having. The outside world is catching up on me, seeing all the struggles that I'm going through on a daily basis just to make it through class and stay afloat. And they're also watching what I'm doing and how I'm looking. And at this time, like physically, I do not look well at all. But so then I told myself as soon as the money ran out, that's when I was going to get myself together. That didn't work. The money that was supposed to last me all the way through whatever it was, I set, I think it was around this time. It was like Halloween. My money was out by then. And I'm really bad off at this point. I'm physically ill every morning trying to make it to school. As soon as I leave class or even cut class, I'm going to go drink or get some other substance in my body just to be okay. That all kind of came crashing down. It's funny how I guess word can travel, or just how bad a shape I was in. One of my friends was actually living in Europe, and he sent an email to my family that said, hey, you need to do something. This was my best friend. He was like, your son, he is really, really bad off. He was communicating with other friends through Facebook and seeing things like that, and he knew the point that I was at. And New Year's Eve, I went out that night, and I had a friend in town, and we were going out with my parents and their friends. So this is a mixed group. I'm 22 years old at this time, and then it's a group of my parents' friends, and then we're going to be going out to, we had people over at our house, and then we were going out to some bars downtown Raleigh. I don't remember much of it at all. I just know that what I was told was that around 9 o'clock, when the limo came to pick us up to take us to the bar, we stopped at a gas station. I got out of the limo, urinated on the limo, and then got in the limo and passed out, and they had to have the driver and a friend take me back to the house. So the next day was when I woke up to an intervention. Just literally like you would see in the movies, because this email came through from my friend about this same time, to my whole family sitting around my bed, just being like, what is wrong? Please tell us, please tell us. And so at this point, I know that I have to give some of the story up, but I definitely wasn't giving all the story up. So I told them that I had a problem and made them feel better, that I was willing to stop. Because at this point, they're like, please just stop. Just stop doing what you're doing. My poor mom, she laid on the floor in my room for 3 days while I detoxed, because I was in so much pain and just couldn't move, but also at the same time to try to stop me from leaving. And I say like she laid there on the floor, but there was a lot of times where she was yelling for my dad to come up, and he's physically holding me down from running out of the room. Parents in the room, I don't recommend it. It didn't work at all. But that's when I finally really started. That's when the doctors started. That's when I started going to doctors, psychiatrists, all of these things to just be like, what is wrong with you, John? Please just stop. Just grow up. And then from there began really the treatment centers, because I tried to stop, but I could not stop on my own. Waking up, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I need a drink or I need some substance in my body to face life. I don't know why. I didn't know why that was at the time, but what I knew was that you couldn't stop me. Even my parents sitting there looking at me crying, like, please don't leave the house. Please don't do this. They tried to unplug the battery on my car one time just so I couldn't leave the house. But they knew when I got that look in my eyes where, like, I needed that. And now I know that that's that mental obsession, that I need this and I need it now. I was gone. I eventually asked for help because life was getting really hard. Like, I'm sure, as you guys know, life gets hard when you're living that life. And I went to my first treatment center. And at that time, I really wanted help. Like, I was desperate. My mom still has this note to that day. I got really tore up the night before and wrote a little goodbye letter to the world. Unsuccessfully killed myself on the way down to my first treatment center. When I got there, I was so messed up that the suicide note was sitting on the top of my bag. And the first thing they do is they search your bags. My parents are standing right there. They're like, what is this? So then all of a sudden they're like, all right, take his shoelaces. They did this thing where they put you on a 1-for-1 where they have this little guy from New York sitting right next to my bed for the next 24 hours watching every one of my moves. And I got there and I got that detox that I thought I needed. I was there for 30 days. I started feeling healthy. And at that point, they're bringing in AA meetings in there. They're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. There's also God on the Wall, which really upset me. I had to call my mom one night and be like, where did you send me to? But I don't know what it was. I just wasn't ready at that point, or I wasn't hearing the message. Because what I thought that I needed from there was just, I am physically detoxed. I look back and I was like, wow, the past 2 years got out of control. Okay, what I need now is I need to contact law school, make sure I'm still in good standing. I need to get myself a little job, get a car, get an apartment, get my life back together, and go from there. Because I genuinely believe that was what I needed. That was the issue. Like, it wasn't that I couldn't control it. My willpower at that point could keep me sober. That was not the case. I can't describe. I have so many times like this, like people refer to like a relapse or whatever. I don't know why I took that after going to my first treatment center, why I took that drink. Like, I remember the day, it was a nice day out, nothing great happened, nothing bad happened. It just happened. Like, I have no idea why it happened, but it happened. And I drank, and I 100% experienced the physical allergy that it talks about in the book. I told myself, I literally told myself, like, it was just going to be just one. Like, it's okay, I'm fine. That was not the case. I continued to drink at that sober living that I was placed in when I left that treatment center every day, knowing the consequences of what would happen, which would be me stranded in Florida away from my family. And trust me, I'm a child at this point. I have to call my mom for everything. And I would have been in Florida with no help, and having nowhere to live, that still didn't stop me. I couldn't stop at that point. And from there, I went to about, I don't know, like 10 or 11 more detoxes or treatment centers. Only reason why I know the number, I think it's 13, is because United Healthcare started to get really mad when I'd show up at these detoxes or treatment centers, and 3 days later I would just dip out. But that was my thing. That was my thing there was I would want help. I'd go in there. I'd usually stay for about 24 to 48 hours until the thought came into my mind. Like, I could be sitting in a meeting just like this, that it would be like, I need a drink and I need it now. 5 minutes later, I'm up at the nurse's desk like, hey, and I know the terms by this. I was like, hey, I want an AMA, leave against medical advice. Let's get this paperwork going. I got to go. And then I would just leave all my bags, leave everything, and just head out the doors. And that lasted for about a year. I was sleeping on the beach down in Florida, just figuring out every day how I could collect some money just to get messed up for that day. I had no hope and no future. It seemed so unobtainable to turn my life around from there. A year ago, I was in law school. Fast forward a year later, I'm sleeping on the beach. I have 2 outfits, and I shower in the outside showers at the beach access. And every morning at 6 a.m., some guy comes to wake me up off the little bench because they're going to put the mats out to rent those chairs out for the day. And that was just my life. Like, I didn't see a way out of that. In that meantime, There was a lot of attempted stops, but they were very short-lived when I didn't do anything about it. One night I was feeling really down. I had communicated with my parents and told them that I wanted help. My mom left that next morning, drove down, but by that point, that day, I had already started drinking and using, and there was absolutely no way I was getting in that car. So my mom and dad drove from North Carolina to Florida to come pick me up, and I stood there in a Walgreens parking lot. I was like, oh, sorry, guys. No, I don't want the help anymore. And that just, to me, like, that shows, and at the time, I have no idea. I mean, in my mind, that seems like the only option is I'm not getting in your car because then you're going to take me away from this drink. And I am absolutely not doing that. But to look, my mom was bawling, my dad is furious, but to look them in the eyes and just be like, I can't come with you, it just shows how powerless I am over this. So fast forward a little farther, more treatment centers. What eventually happened was I went to a treatment center in Texas. And at this time, so I left from Florida to go to Texas. And I really meant business this time. I had hurt a lot of people, and my life was continuing to get worse. Externally, my life was getting worse, but also it talks about the disease being progressive. My power of choice was getting worse. Like early on, I was able to kind of make that decision on, hey, I have $500 for rent. I'll pay the bills and I'll still figure out the drinking money. At this point, the first thing that I'm spending my money on is drugs and alcohol. I'm doing those things that I never said that I would do to get drugs and alcohol. I'm leaving hospitals and drinking on the way home when alcohol ended me up there. And it talks about that in the big book. As well from there, I leave jail. The first thing I do is go and drink, knowing that I ended up in jail for a DUI. But I just can't control it at this point, and I'm baffled by it. But by this point, I'm going to a lot of places where AA is being brought there. I didn't come running into AA. What happened was I went to places that AA was brought to. That's how the seed was planted. And I went to this treatment center out in Texas. Like I said, I've been around treatment centers a lot. I picked up a ton of white chips, 30 days here, all of that. But I just couldn't seem to grasp it. And really what it was is I just wasn't ready and I wasn't willing to do the work. That is all that it was. So I went to this treatment center and I meant business. On day 24, I think it was, out of a 30-day treatment center, I remember, because I always had a stash with me everywhere I went, even when I went to treatment centers. And I went out to my car with some guys there that also meant business as well, went out to my car, poured out and threw out everything that was stashed away in my car because I was really doing it this time. They offered you the opportunity to bring sponsors onto that campus and work with sponsors there. It was very heavy Big Book and AA related facility. However, I didn't do any of that. I was just like, hey, I'll get around to this when I get out. And that wasn't the case. Even though I was real serious about sobriety while I was there, 2 hours within, I made it 2 hours, probably not even 2 hours, of leaving that treatment center before I was messed up again in a hotel room. I was supposed to be driving from Texas to North Carolina, and I had this great plan in my mind. When I got to North Carolina, I was going to call this guy that was going to be my sponsor and blah, blah, blah. That didn't happen. I ended up making it back to North Carolina, and this is really where things start to turn around. I get to North Carolina, I'm going to be living with my parents because they are done at this point. I have no other options. I've exhausted everything. And so they said, this is your one shot, is to live with us. And also the guy, I'll mention the guy who now is currently my sponsor, but at the time when I was driving to North Carolina to be my sponsor, he is a great member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because during that time, just like it talks about in the book, like, he is working with my family, coaching them through this whole thing about what's going to happen. He's not reaching out to me. He's telling them he will call me when he's ready. And sure enough, that happened. I showed up in a home where my mom was prepared. She had knowledge of this disease of Alcoholics Anonymous and what her expectations were of me living there. And so I moved back into the house. For 2 days, I basically locked myself in my room, going insane, because it's absolutely true that like when I get sober, when you take away my medicine, my life gets worse. My brain won't quiet. That's when everything's going on. And from some knucklehead in the treatment center that I was in, he told me that if you take a bunch of Imodium pills, you could kind of get like a little buzz off that. So for 2 days, I'm sitting in my room popping like 30 Imodium pills, which are anti-diarrheal pills. Not feeling anything, not feeling any effect from it, but that's just my mind saying something has to be different. I'm content. I'm fully detoxed at this point in a house where everything's going to be okay, everything's provided, but I am still not okay. That's what my life looks like when I'm sober. But finally, I don't know what happened. 2 days later, when this was the day, this was the make or break day. This was the day when I was going to do something about it or I was off to the races. I remember sitting in a parking lot, looking at my bank account that had like $3 or $2 in it, figuring out in my mind how I'm going to get the best buzz for that $3. And I don't know what happened, but I ended up calling that guy, that's my sponsor now, and I hadn't talked to him in about 6 years. And I called him, and I said, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I'm sitting in the car right now, and I'm probably about to go drink, and I know things are not going to be good from here. And he just asked me, he's like, all right, are you at that point where you're willing to do whatever? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, I want you right now to read the doctor's opinion and then meet up with me tomorrow. And that's when things changed. That's when I actually became willing, because as soon as I hung up the phone with him, I then started reading the doctor's opinion on my phone right there. I Googled it and I started reading it. And then I called him after and he said, okay, what time are we meeting up tomorrow? And that next day I met with him. I was a wreck at this point. I went and I met with him. I was not looking good at all. I was not feeling good at all. I was absolutely suicidal. I don't know if it was that I didn't want to kill myself, but I just didn't want to live. And also the hole that I dug myself in seemed impossible to get out of. When I was down in Florida living homeless, I also did this little scheme with credit cards to where I dug myself about 50 grand in debt, bounced off in a couple places that I was living in. And those were the things that like, I started to there was no hope for me because I didn't understand how a person could possibly climb out from that. I was also out on bond in Texas, living in North Carolina. There's just a lot of things. And I walked in, I sat down with this guy, and what he did, what I know now, is he qualified me as an alcoholic. He sat down and he opened the book in the doctor's opinion talking about this cycle, talking about men and women drink essentially for the effect produced by alcohol. And we started actually on a whiteboard in his office drawing out the cycle of alcoholism as well as my life. And he starts explaining to me how this is a disease, that I'm mentally and physically different from others. And this is when something happened to me where this clicked. I looked at this, even though I had been living it for years, and he could look at me and say, yeah, I see what happens every time you take that first drink. Then you hit these sprees, emerge remorseful, then fall right back into that spiritual malady. He can see that, but it was at this point that I finally saw that. And all of this clicked, and I said, that's me. Like, that is my life, what you just described. I am absolutely an alcoholic. And he was like, okay, that is all we need to know. And then from there, we had a very short conversation about God and my beliefs. And at this point, I am absolutely desperate. I'm willing to believe in anything, but also this guy won me over. I saw this in him, the changes that occurred in his life. Because years before, the last time I saw him, actually, it's funny how this works out, was about, like I said, 6 years before that, when I was in college and I was up to no good. And the last time that I left him, he was in the same position that I was in. He was strung out on drugs, and I was actually in his apartment robbing him. And so, but when I got back to Raleigh, he was the only lifeline that I had. And just to see in him the changes in those 6 years that occurred in his life, and to see his willingness of how he wanted to help me, in my mind, I was just like, this guy has something that I want. The way that he presented himself, and then the way that he told me that I could achieve this. He told me that all I had to do was just follow this plan of action laid out in the big book, and everything will be okay. And I don't know why I was so open and willing to hear it this time, And I also think it had a lot to do with him and the way he carried himself. That was huge because I saw it in this guy. It talks about that on page 164, how basically you have to have this thing in order to pass it on to someone else. And that was absolutely true because I knew that this guy had that. He had it in him. And at that point, I was willing to do whatever. At that point, right then, we sat down in this conference room and we got on our knees and we did a third step prayer. And he described to me what the third step and how it's my selfishness is the problem. And I'm just sitting there paying attention, trying to absorb everything, because he also told me that the only reason that I'm doing this is for you then to pass this on to someone else. And he was like, so pay close attention. And then exactly like it says in the book, as soon as we finished doing that and finished doing the third step prayer, I got it right here. It then says, next we launched out on a course of vigorous action. And he described that to me as like, in the past, because, I really messed around with the steps. I had sponsors by name, kind of did the steps very slowly. But what he told me is he said, you need God in your life and you need him now because you absolutely will drink again. And I was 100% convinced of that I would drink again. He was like, so we're going to follow this exactly what it says. In this book, it doesn't say next we met up a week later, 2 weeks later, and we started writing this fourth step. It says next we launched out on a course of vigorous action. So right then and there was when I started doing this. I didn't have a license at the time, so I'm actually in this conference room starting on my fourth step while my mom's on my way to come pick me up. She comes and picks me up, and then I go home that night and I finish doing my fourth step that day or the next day. A few days later, I meet up with him. We do my fifth step. From there, I go home, and just like it's laid out in the book, I do 6 and 7. And this whole way along this time, he's given me these little bits about AA and what AA actually is. Because my mind was I had this idea in my mind of what AA was. AA was me having to go to a meeting every day for like 90 and 90. Then after the next year, I could do 5 meetings a week. Like I had this idea in my head of what it was. And he starts describing me and reading this book and telling me exactly what AA is. And he's given me clear instructions on what to do each day. He's giving me clear-cut instructions. So I went home. I did 6 and 7. So at this point, I'm probably about maybe 5 days sober. I do 6 and 7, and then I call him. The other thing that he let me know is that he has a life, and he's absolutely willing to help me, but he is not going to be there to hold my hand and take me to a meeting every night. He was like, this will just show me how much you want it. He was like, you'll work these steps and get better, but you're also going to have to get involved. And he gave me a few meetings in the Raleigh area that he told me that I was going to go to, and I was going to immerse myself into the group, get me a home group, meet some other people, because I need to do that so that I can then pass this on and help other people. From there, I remember he was out of town. I called him, and he had actually a harms list from my fifth step, and he gave me some names of some people that I was going to make amends to. And then he also told me to come up with these other people that I harmed. We sat there on the phone, and we talked about these amends that I had to make. And then from there, once again, I launched right into it. He told me that we're going to go through this quickly. And so then for the next 4 days, with that involved, was me driving all around Raleigh. Actually, having my mom drive me all around Raleigh, going to make amends to all these people. The hardest one for me, I think, was Time Warner Cable. I racked up so much money. That was the biggest resentment. That was the biggest resentment that I had was Time Warner Cable. Because I owed them so much money, and it seemed so impossible for me to deal with that. And he's telling me to pray. I prayed for probably legit 10 minutes before calling Time Warner and talking to some little customer rep. Being like, hey, I don't know what to do. I have all this payment. Anyways, made my amends. And then from there, and then since then, it's just been steps 10, 11, and 12 every day. He told me, he was like, the reason why we're doing this is so you can help people, and that's exactly what I did. By the time I was 30 days sober, I was raising my hand to sponsor guys, looking at him saying, there's nobody that's going to let me sponsor them with 30 days sober. And he was like, you're going to raise your hand, you're going to do it. And I said, absolutely. And then I remember, it's crazy, he told me, this was such a big thing for me, because at this point, I'm starting to feel better. I'm waking up, and I am no longer, in my mind, obsessing over alcohol. That was removed from me. And that was really all that I was looking for. And he assured me that I was going to get much more than that. But I was cool with just that. I was content. And my life was actually getting better. That fear that I had going around people sober, like walking into a meeting like this, all those nerves, every night, every meeting I went to, that was getting less and less. And the thing was, I had tried that so many times in the past. I had tried to get rid of so many of my issues and these things that I had, but I had never taken some sort of spiritual action or relied on God for this. And that's what I started to do. Literally everything. Like, I wasn't kidding. When I called Time Warner Cable, I was praying before that. And I was doing that before everything. I started building this connection with God. And so I remember that night before, I talked to him. I think it was like, oh yeah, I was talking to a guy. I almost had a sponsee or something like that. He was like, tonight I want you to go home and pray for one. And I was around 30 days sober. Next night I went to a meeting, and some guy asked me to sponsor him, and I thought it was insane. But now looking back, like, I see why. Like, I haven't been sober that long, but it's been a long time since I've thought about drinking. And when you see someone, like when I see someone in the rooms that's like 90 days sober, 60 days sober, something like that, and their life is really good, like that's like what I wanted when I was. The people that have 6 years sober, 10 years sober, them to spot, that seems so unobtainable. But when you see someone that has that short amount of time and they're through the work and they're happy and they're telling them that they can experience the same thing if they just do this, that's why I think early on, like, I was able to sponsor a lot of men. I'm grateful for that. It's a process that just works. Like, there's nothing about it. He told me to go out and sponsor as many people as possible, and that's what I did. I listened to this guy for everything. He said after the meeting, anyone that introduces himself as a newcomer at the beginning of the meeting, he was like, you better be the first one over there talking to him at the beginning of the meeting. He's like, you don't have to sponsor him, but you better ask him if he has a sponsor, and if not, would you like you to sponsor him or to help him find a sponsor? And I still do that now. And then from there, another huge part of my sobriety is nightly inventory. To continue my spiritual growth and to not grow stagnant, every night I take nightly inventory. I actually write mine down. The big book doesn't say to do that, but it does in the big book on page 86. It talks about when we retire at night. And that talks about every night. My sponsor stressed the importance of this to me because I was going to a lot of meetings early on. And he was just saying to me, he was like, look, he's like, I find it fascinating that early on a lot of people, 90 and 90, go to a meeting every day. And, it may not say that in the big book, but in the big book, it does say when we retire at night, we do this. And so I took that to heart. And so it's in the book. And so I do that. I mean, it's rare that I miss a night when I don't do that. And I've experienced a lot of growth by doing that. The other thing that helps prevent is, if I continue to keep that path to God clear and I continue to look at my character defects, that prevents me from having to go through and write another fourth step and do another fifth step. So I like to keep up with that maintenance and do that on a daily basis. That's been huge for spiritual growth. Also, like I talked about at the beginning, my home group, I got super involved there. Our meetings are on Monday night, and then every Tuesday we take a meeting to a detox. And that was something that for a really long time that I did not miss. If I was able to be there, I was there on Tuesday nights just trying to help someone. And that's what I would let them know, because I was that guy in detox that didn't want the help for the longest time. And that's why I tell them, like, hey, if you want help, we're here, but if not, it's okay. I totally get it. The life from there, all of these promises in this book have come true. All the debt, I've been able to resolve that. I'm still paying some of it off, but I have a plan of action for doing that. Relationships have been restored. I've been through a lot of hard things. When I was about 3 months sober, my best friend, actually the one that was in Europe, that emailed my parents, said I needed help, he suddenly died out of nowhere. He was coming in town for my sister's wedding because he was a part of the wedding. He was a very close member of my family. He ended up dying. And sure, it was hard. Like, I missed him, and it was just a really sad thing, and it sucked. But there was never one time during that period where I thought a drink or a drug seemed like a good idea. And that's the results that are promised in this book. It's insane. So I've been sober for a year and a half now. I've got a little over a year and a half. I've got to experience things that I never thought when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous that I could do. I thought AA was going to be a very restricted life, meaning that I wasn't going to be able to hang out with certain people. I was going to have to go to all these damn meetings. I was going to have to do all these things. That has not been the case. Just like it talks about in the promises, like I no longer have the desire to drink. I've been on trips with friends. I went to Vegas with all my friends. They all drink. While I was there, I didn't drink. Last 2 months ago, I went to Colombia. And like I said, I love those outside substances as well. I didn't do any cocaine while I was in Colombia, I promise. Was offered it numerous times, but no, it's not a hard thing. I thought that it was going to be something that what I thought AA was. I thought it was going to be something that at that point in time, when I get offered that cocaine when I'm in Colombia or whatever, when I go to the bar, I'm going to have to dial my sponsor right then and be like, hey man, I was just at this bar and this happened. That's not the case. When I work this program, the way that it's laid out here, I am free of that. And like I have expressed, like not just that. I don't wake up with a mental obsession, but also those relationships that I have with my parents, the people that I've met in the rooms. And it's so cheesy, but people always say, and I'm only, 18 months sober or something like that people say, hey, I got a life that I never imagined I could have had or something like that. That is absolutely true. I am leaving really early tomorrow morning. I'm flying out to go to the Bahamas with my family. Vacation was always a really hard thing in the past because that was going to be 9 days where I was going to have to really try to control my drinking and probably make an ass of myself. So I never looked forward to it. And tomorrow I get to leave with them and enjoy this. When I get back, I'm moving to Austin, Texas, November 1st, to go work for one of my friends who's actually in the program. In the short time that I've been sober, I've landed friends. I now actually have a career, and I wake up every day, and it is not a struggle for me to go into a bar or do those things. And it is simply a result of just doing this, and that's why I continue to come to AA meetings, I guess, is because to try to help. Because I remember what it was like sitting in that seat, looking at that person that was years sober, being like, dude, I don't believe you. I don't believe that your life is that good or that you don't think about not drinking. And that's why I come. I come try to talk to those guys, relate, hopefully help them identify, because that's where it started for me. When I sat down with someone and I identified and he qualified me as an alcoholic, and then he offered me a way out from there, that's really when I got the changes. And I'm grateful for that, and I'm just kind of rambling at this point, so I'll go ahead and I'll shut up. I appreciate you guys having me once again. Thank you very much.